You're listening to The Success Paradigm with your hosts, Jay Atkins and Greg Gray.
All right, ready, Jay?
Ready, Greg?
Let's do it.
So this is our first podcast, Greg, and I am so excited about this. This has been a long time coming. We've discussed this for probably the last year and a half, and we've kind of reshaped it and thought about what we can do. One, to be different and bring the most value to our listeners. And the concept behind this is we want to interview some of the most successful people that we both know and really dig into their story, because most people want the glory in life. Most people want all the success, but they're not willing to create the story. And I want to hear the story. I want to hear about their biggest failures. I want to hear how they came back from failure. I want to hear what mentality they had and also the level of what is success to them. So I thought best for our first podcast for it to be you, one of the most successful people that I know that I've got to run with. And I thought it would be just a great start for us to talk about, because I think a lot of people know you from stage, but a lot of people don't know you how I know you. And,
Okay.
The other reason I wanted to do this podcast, and the one reason we wanted to do this podcast, is because we're really good at asking questions. I know I'm really good at asking questions. I ask people some questions sometimes that I don't think they're going to give me the answer to, and they do.
Every time, shamelessly, every time. I've seen that over and over again. So, right.
And that's how I've learned. Everything I tell everyone this, everything that I've done or created, I've stole. And it's from asking questions. If I see someone successful, I'm going to ask them how they did it, where they failed. And I figured, why not bring that to everyone in the world so that you can actually get behind the curtain or behind the scenes and figure out how they created that success. So I want to start with you. How did you get here where you are, Greg? What is your story? How did you get here?
So that particular question is probably the one that I've been asked more than any other question. And one of the reasons I'm glad we're doing the podcast is because I don't normally get a chance to ask it. My life has been, for 25 years, for the most part, going to the airport, getting on a plane, standing in front of a few hundred people, doing a seminar, a class, or a speech, talking to people for a minute, and get back on a plane and come home. But one of the questions that I do get a chance to field from time to time is that one. So how did you get here? So I I think the best way to start with is to kind of describe that here has been a moving target. So here today versus here even 4 years ago, or here 8 years ago, or 12 years ago, is very different. Um, so against that backdrop, most people, I guess, know me through the speaking, having the speaking firm and doing the training and seminars and stuff. And it actually started in a really interesting and unusual way. One that most people wouldn't
Greg,
believe.
I want to
Here we
go.
go.
I want to. I
Here
want
we
to.
go.
I want to go way back.
Okay. Okay.
Where Greg was shaped and where Greg was formed, and not who Greg, people that know Greg now. I want to go back to when Greg was a kid. That's how far back I want to go, because I want our
Uh,
listeners to know who Greg Gray is, because I was fortunate to be on many plane rides with you, sitting
right.
next to you, and asking you some questions that surprised me. And I saw you through a different lens than I did after those questions. So let's go way back. Let's dig down deep and
Okay. So
talk
that's
about
how
that.
we're gonna play this, huh? We're gonna
Yes.
play it that way. Okay. Uh
And by the way, Greg doesn't know what any of these questions are,
I
because
am completely blind
and
here.
and the reason why we're going to do this on every podcast in the future is we're going to give you some general questions, whoever comes on here, but we want this to be authentic as possible. So Greg was trying to trick me a couple of times and asked me to send him some things, and I told him I would send it to him after the podcast. So it was a good
Yes.
try.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's go way back, Greg. Let's go back
Okay.
to the skinny kid that
Okay.
was like
All right.
70
Okay.
pounds. Okay.
At least let me say that part. So, so the I think the kid that kind of um the kind of the in the cocoon kid, that kind of turned into this guy, that does go way, way, way back. So most people would not believe that for a very big part of my life, early years, I was pretty reclusive. I mean, I talked to people a lot that I knew extraordinarily well, and my main outlet was music, actually. So was that was the way that I communicated most outwardly. But I was, I'm 6'1" now, but when I can remember, and I know the story you're going for. So um, this kid, eighth grade, Thurl High School in Southwest Atlanta. Um, High school was eighth to 12th grade, so it was PE, and so this was me getting a chance to dress out. For those of you who are a little younger, you won't have any concept of what I'm talking about when I say dressing out in PE, but you actually had um, kind of a uniform almost, shorts and t-shirt. And so in the eighth grade, just to give you some context, the guy that is now 6'1" and heavier than he's proud of was 4'7" and weighed 72 pounds, because what they did in PE the first day was they measured you. So I was 4'7", 72 pounds. And so I was a very small kid, as in my mother would tell you now, she would have to put bricks in my pocket so that the wind wouldn't blow me away. That's how little it was. And I remember that one of the most seminal moments in my life was dressing out, coming up to the gym, Thurl High School gym. I can see it right now. And I'm walking up the stairs to go into the gym and just feel kind of odd, like it's just because I had the extra small shirt and it was going almost all the way down to my knees. That's how um, small I was. And I'm thinking, is it really cold here? And I don't know if I want to go out. My legs look like chicken legs and all that stuff. And I realized that I was almost about to go out on the floor at high school, where the kids are very kind, by the way, not. And I forgot my shorts. So I was walking to a gym in Thurl High School, and the people who know Thurl High School will know that that was probably a really big mistake. But I remember going back down, and the guys in the locker room realizing what was going on, and they were laughing. So a lot of my youth, uh, I can remember a lot of laughter, but I also remember being the reason people were laughing. And it a lot of my memories of my childhood, I didn't like high school very much at all. I did okay in high school, but I didn't like it because most of my memories when I was a kid was people laughing. And somehow, and I'm not gonna jump too far forward because you're not gonna permit it, but I think one of the reasons I enjoy laughing or making people laugh now, or just doing things that are funny, is because now when people laugh, they laugh on my terms. Uh, so they're laughing with, but not laughing at. And I think you'll find that with a lot of people that are very successful, and you're going to be up in the next podcast, that a lot of us are driven by little seminal moments like that almost nobody knows about. But I can remember thinking, even then, uh, this is going to have to change one day. I'm not going to live my life being the guy that everybody points at and laughs at and all that kind of stuff. It was difficult. I'm not going to lie. But then success is difficult. Um,
But you've been able to turn that into creating success for yourself, because one of the things I think about speakers and what I enjoy about speakers, watching them, is when they can make me laugh and bring me out of the thought that they're in. And so from that, you've been able to turn that into success, which I've always thought you were really funny. I always, when I'm in the back of the
yeah.
room and I hear the whole audience laugh at you, and just, I just think that's a gift um, that keeps on giving. And I think that, from that, I think that's why it's important to share this story, is because
Yep.
what you've been able to bring out of that is amazing.
Well, and what you said is important because I think over time, I didn't see it as a gift when I was younger, uh, because of how I thought it was happening. But as I got older, I understood that if you can make people smile and make people laugh, especially if you can do it in very real ways, because anyone that's ever been in one of my seminars knows that I don't sugarcoat things, but I try to talk about things the way they actually are. And the saddest things and the funniest things are always the most true things. So I've learned that it's a gift now, but if I could tell you a secret, Jay, it's honestly, I do things because I think they're funny. And if other people think they're funny, it's kind of cool too. But it's also kind of, me healing um, too, from what that little skinny kid in the Thurl High School gym, the trauma of those moments back there. I didn't even, by the way, one of my biggest celebrations in high school, Jay, was when I was in the 10th grade, because I was 5 feet tall when I was 16. The most important thing in my life was to be 5 feet tall. I mean, everything around my life revolved around me being 5 feet tall at 16. But most people wouldn't know that. So, but it did set me up for understanding what I was going to have to do, not just to physically be taller, but to stand taller in terms of what I wanted to accomplish in my life. So,
So you got out of high school, and what was the next? What was your next step?
so Overland College in Overland, Ohio, North Central Ohio, a very highly regarded college. Um, I found out later, one of our T-shirts, Overland's the Harvard of the Midwest. That was kind of like our nickname. But I didn't go to Overland for those reasons. I went to Overland because it was the school that accepted me. They sent me a letter, first of all. Back in the day, that everything was letters, and usually that you'd get the letter that says, "Dear applicant" or "Dear prospective college student." So Oberlin was the only college that sent a letter that said, "Dear Greg." So that was one thing. Uh, Understanding the personal, that being a personal touch was important to me. Um, my mom still doesn't, she'll probably find this out now, but I had applications for Brown and Princeton, Harvard and Stanford and all those places, but I never sent those applications in. The only application I sent in actually was for Overland College, and I got in. I never visited the campus, not even once. You know why I went to Oberlin? Because they said, "Dear Greg," and because it was as far away as I could get from Thurl High School in Atlanta, Georgia, as possible, so that no one would know me there, and I could create an entirely different and new persona and identity that was not colored by that past I was talking about. So it's a very difficult school to get through, but I went to it not because of its history. It has a very rich history. I've learned more about it since I graduated, quite frankly, but it was an escape.
And then what was next? Well, what did you do after that?
Well, after this extraordinarily expensive college, and I graduated in 1982, and I think that back then even it cost like 25, 26, $27,000 a year to go there back then. Um, but I had no path. In fact, the what happened before I graduated was kind of funny, because this is kind of how my life was working at the time. So my college advisor, Booker Peak, for those of you who are Oberlin College folks, you'll remember Booker Peak's name. He was my advisor, and he's called me to a meeting in his office when I was a junior, second semester junior year, and he said, "Greg, we need to talk about your major," because I still hadn't chosen a major as of my junior year in college. And he said, "So what are you going to, you have to have a major. What are you going to choose?" And I remember saying to him, "Do you have a copy of my transcript?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Let's look at it." And he pulled it out, and I said, "Well, what do I have the most hours in?" Um, he said, "Communications." I said, "Sounds like a great major." So when people hear now, Jay, that I was a communications major, they say, "Oh, that's awesome. That kind of makes sense." And I always say, "It's just what I had the most hours in." So even then was kind of stumbling into things without any intentionality, but was smart enough in most cases to kind of make it through. But it was not, there was no intentionality. So that's why I ended up working at Unclaimed Furniture Mart with $100,000 education, selling furniture on Campbellton Road in Southwest Atlanta for a guy called the Wolfman. So yeah, that was it. I was selling 5-piece dining room, living room sets for $199. That's what, and my mom got me that job because she was a finance manager for the store. So still no path, no figuring out where I was going, any of that stuff. So it doesn't sound like a lot like success yet, does it?
Well, I mean, I think that's what success is, right? It's all about the
Yeah,
journey and the story and all of the things that have happened or not happened. And then
right.
then what was your big break?
Um, so after working at the furniture store and then working at the jewelry store, which some of our clients in another space know about, I went to work for MCI,
Okay.
the long distance phone company, and it was a call center, customer service call center, and was really good at it. Enjoyed it. Moved up to the ranks of being a supervisor on the floor there, and just got burned out. Quite frankly, enjoyed it, but got burned out, and a job came open for a training position, and I had zero idea what that was going to be about. But then that's how my life had been up until that point. Let's just fall into something else until you figure it out. So um, most of my friends thought it was a horrible idea because I was so incredibly disorganized, and my desk looked like a bomb had been set off on it most days. And they're like, trainers kind of have to be organized. And I just didn't want to be a supervisor anymore. So again, I wasn't trying to be a trainer because I wanted to be a trainer. I was, and a lot of people are probably like this at some point in time in their life. I just didn't want to be what I was. So I just chose something different. And so I became a trainer. And I will tell you that that position, within 2 weeks of doing that position, I could not figure out why I had ever done anything different in my life. It was home. And that was really the genesis of it. Some of my closest friends right now, even on Facebook, know me from MCI, not so much as a supervisor, but as the trainer. And
So
that
let
was
me
when it started.
so let me stop you there. What
Yeah.
you just said, I want to dig a little deeper. So,
Yeah.
what was it? Like, what was it that made you feel like, man, this is what I love to do. I love to train people. I love to. What was it about that?
Well, I think a lot of it was that I didn't have the training department had some structure to it, but it was evolving and growing pretty quickly. So a lot of what we were doing, we were learning and kind of creating on the fly. And I like doing that kind of thing. So I, the supervisor job had a lot of guardrails to it, and it was very structured. And and as I mentioned before, structure and Greg's level of organization did not gel that well. I was a good supervisor, but it just wasn't. I didn't like it. But then I got in this space where um, basically they just kind of gave me the keys to the initial training program and said, "We want this program," and it was a 6-week training program for new employees, and we want to craft this. And they said, so you've been a supervisor on the floor, you know what people need. How would you put it together? And so I got a blank canvas. And all of a sudden, I was able to create what I wanted to do in real time and watch it actually work. And so before, it's not that things were stodgy before, because I wouldn't want anybody to be offended that listens to this or hears it that was in the training department before. But we played music in the morning when we got started. There were different games that we'd bring in, different icebreakers. We would do all kind of goofy stuff because I realized that people learn better when they're having a good time, even if what you're teaching them is difficult stuff. That's what I learned. And so it was really just like I was like a free bird. It was like someone opened the cage and said, you fly wherever you want to fly with this, as long as you get results. And that was the moment that turned everything around. In terms of, I knew that I would always be doing that in some shape, form, or fashion. So that
And
was
and
in MCI.
and so, how did you transition out of MCI, where you were now your own boss, running your own successful speaking company, and basically what you've told me, the stress of living gig to gig, paycheck to paycheck.
So yeah, so here's the thing. So in the training department, as is the case in a lot of companies, back then there was career track was the kind of the place that companies would send people to basically to go cannibalize their ideas and bring them back and make it look like it was the company's own idea, whether it was training or processes or systems. So a couple of us went to this training program. It was on, for those of people who are listening to this in Atlanta, it was in Marietta. It was on Delk Road. It was a Holiday Inn on Delk Road. I'll never forget it. So another trainer from my same call center went to this place, uh, room that's set up for maybe 60, 70 people or something like that. And so we're in this room, and this guy's doing this class, and he's talking about customer service. And I always sit in the front because I just feel like that's how I'm going to engage more. And I was into training, so I was like, everything was like a laboratory for me. But I was sitting in the class, and I'm looking, and this guy's good, and I'm thinking, he's good, but I could probably catch him. If I really applied myself, I could really catch him. He had great tonality and all this other stuff. And then something hit me, Jay, because you're a numbers guy. Um, Numbers do factor in. So I'm sitting in the room, and so our company spent $200 a piece for us to be there. So for the day, there were 60 of us there. So I don't know why this happened, but all of a sudden, in the middle of a sentence, I kind of drifted away and I said, wait a minute. So 60 of us here, $200 a piece. That's $12,000. We got lunch on our own. Lunch was on our own, so it wasn't catered. We had some muffins and coffee in the morning and some sodas and cookies in the afternoon. And we were done by 3:30. And anybody who remembers what it's like to be able to go to training offsite, one of the greatest things about it is it's like a third of a day off because you don't have to go back to the office. So I'm looking at this, I'm like, this guy is, if everything else, he's clearing $11,000, and he has 60 of us that are gleefully running out of the door at 3:30. I'm like, I might need to look into this because this looks like this has some potential. Fast forward. Um, Before I do that, I realized that I needed to figure out how to do this. So we talk about what success is. And one of the things that success is, before you can even define it, and I think you have this experience too, is that it's messy, it itches, it's lonely. When you are about to do something that you think is bold and different, you will find that the circle of the people around you will change, because some people will go, whoa, and a very few people will say, go. But most people will say, whoa.
All true.
Yes. I mean, so it's second guessing, but it's also knowing that in your heart, if you do what you love, that the rest of it will follow, and really believing that. So
Well, we've talked about this too, is
yeah,
whenever that happens for both of us, it's like jet fuel. Like it's
yeah,
all the more reason to do it when that is happening. And I think, again, that's why you've always been successful, because you've heard a lot of that in your life. You've told me this from family, from friends, is
hmm,
you've heard that whoa a
yep.
lot, and then you're like, go.
Well, fortunately, my blessing is that my family always said go. So, I didn't have those kind of stresses. I mean, my nuclear family was always intact. You know, my dad was an amazing salesperson for a jewelry store for many, many years. My mom was probably a better salesperson than him, because she raised us and convinced us of what it is that we needed to do. But here's the thing. So after that, I realized immediately that I wanted to do some things differently. I had 4 weeks of vacation at that company at the time. I immediately cut back, and only took 2 weeks of actual vacation where I was vacation. You know what the other 2 weeks were all about? Going to
Learning the business.
seminars.
Yep.
Yep. Going, seeing how people sign in. I didn't even care what the subject was. I just went from seminar to seminar to seminar. How do they get their money? How do they pay? What do their workbooks look like? What kind of breaks do they give? Do they give you, all I'm just looking at the business. So I literally did that for months. I did it so long and started saving money so much that I knew I was going to make the leap, but I knew before I made the leap, I needed to have 9 months of funds secured before I did that, because I knew from what I had talked to people about, the thing that will scare most people out of their dreams is going broke. And I needed to have enough time to do it. And by the way, I was married at the time, so this wasn't just my decision. Um, so fast forward 2.5, 3 years, I'm in the airport. It was National Airport before it was called Reagan Airport. We were there for another train the trainer and getting ready to fly back to Atlanta. I look across in the seating area. Who's sitting there? Same guy from Marietta. His name is Bob Summers. Same guy. And so I see him and I walk over to him and I say, Bob Summers. And he did all the things that we try to do to try to act like we remember people's names when we don't really remember people's names. So he was doing all these little strategies. I said, Bob, look, I know you don't remember my name. And honestly, I'm really disappointed because when I was in your class, you told us the most important thing you can remember about somebody is their name. It's the first gift they were ever given. And the fact that you cannot remember my name is breaking my heart. And so he just burst out laughing. Turns out that he was in Washington, D.C., pitching for the largest customer service training program in U.S. history with U.S. Postal Service. That's why he was in D.C. He had never seen me speak before. He barely remembered me, but from that conversation, he invited me to basically what was an audition in Atlanta, where 60 or 70 people came from all over the country because he was going to have 10 or 12 people, by the way, not hired to work for the company, but to be entrepreneurs, so subcontractors. So I'd have to give up all these benefits I had because back then you had benefits when you worked for a major company. I mean, life insurance and health and medical and all that kind of stuff. So um, we went to this thing. So I'm going to tell you this part because you know this part too. So rather than have you dig it out of me. So there's basically it's a showcase. It's like 60 people over the course of 3 days at the Sheraton Hotel right near the Galleria, Cumberland Mall. Um, just so that people know it's that crystallized in my mind. So the thing was everybody was supposed to go up and do 7 minutes. It was almost like stand-up comedian. So give us your best 7 minutes. Give us your best 7 minutes. So these people kept going up. And I went up to Bob and I said, I can't do so. It takes me 10 minutes to say hello. I can't do anything meaningful in 7 minutes. He said, well, then you go last. So watch people go and go and go and go. So I was toward the end of the group and I did the story for the first time that anyone, this is like 91, 92. It was the first time that I had shared what became a very seminal story for me, which is this experience I had in a cab ride in New York. And so that evolved into the Frank the cab driver story later. It's funny. Um, Later in life, people said, well, I've heard that story somewhere else before. Are you sure you didn't take that story? And I was like, why wouldn't you assume that somebody else heard me tell the story first? Very irritating stuff. But anyway, that's what success comes with. Jerk. But anyway, so uh, I got the gig. And that translated to me a couple of months later. The guys, well, actually, back up, Greg. So I made the cut to the final, but he was still pitching his thing to the Postal Service. So he got down to the final 10. He called me, Greg, we're down to the final 10. If we go, are you going to be ready to go? Yep. So I literally went on, it was Corel Word back then. It wasn't Word, Microsoft Word, it's Corel Word, Word Perfect. And I typed up my resignation letter on my screen. I didn't print it, I just typed it up and I saved it. And every day, Jay, I went into that file and I changed the date. Every day. So all of a sudden, this place that I was just working before had become a laboratory. I started studying everything, even in the company where I was working at present, because now I didn't see it as a place where I had to hit the sleep snooze button. I knew it was on the way somewhere. Uh, so he called me a few months later. He said, Greg, we made the cut. Are you in? I said, can you hold on for just a moment? He said, yeah. I put him on hold. I pulled up the file, pressed print, signed it, walked it around to my manager with my 2 weeks notice. And 3 weeks later, I was in Chicago training postal employees. And that's how it happened.
So one of the things that I want to do through these podcasts, when I hear things, I want to kind of highlight them. And I
Yeah,
think this is one of the things I think the listeners should realize, because they might be doing something right now that they don't love, or
right.
they might be working for someone right now that they don't admire. And I think the key word that you just said in that situation is that was your lab.
Hmm.
That's when you were learning and becoming the person that you are today. And I think that's the moment that you need to live in every single part of your life, and
Yep,
understanding that the glory comes from that story. It comes from that journey. It comes from being in that moment and learning from that individual that you don't really admire, not to ever be them or do those things, or
absolutely.
taking advantage of the situation that you can train 2, 3, 4,000 employees at a major company and have an impact on their life, to now take that out on your own. So I think, again, sometimes people feel stuck, but I think if you look at it the way you just described it, as it was a lab for you, and when the moment was right, you took all of that work, and all of that learnings and maybe failures, that you had at that company, and now took them on to create this next level of your life and this next business that you created in your life.
Yeah. Well, the irony is that that job that started with me going to, as a subcontractor, going to Chicago, is translated later into over 2 million miles in the air. But you want to hear something really weird? There was a time in my life where there were jobs I passed up because they said travel was involved. And I said, nope, I don't want to travel. And I ended up with a job that has me going to 49 different states and 12 different countries. And um, so, but what made it different was when I knew what the finish line looked like in my mind. Everything changed at that point. All my relationships changed. I even told some of my friends I was going to be leaving when I printed it, and because I kind of kept it close to my vest. And I will tell you, this is the difficult part because it kind of hurt a little bit, is that um, I had a considerable number of people that were close friends of mine, and when I told them that I was going to take this journey, that I was going to make this leap, that this is my dream made manifest, the thing that I've been looking forward to, finding an opportunity to for for years now, sacrificing and not taking vacations and all this stuff, that I was surprised by the people that said, "Are you sure? They kind of like you here. Why would you throw all that away?" And there's a cautionary tale there, Jay. And that is every time you're about to make the next move, there are going to be people that you thought were going to rally around you, and they're not. And it's not because they're bad people. When I think about it now and I think back on it, I think it kind of scares people when you are doing something that they don't have the courage to do, or don't have the foresight to do, or don't have the dream to do. It's kind of like how married people don't like to hang around with people that are divorced, because I don't want them talking to that guy, because I don't want them putting stuff in his mind. It's a very weird thing. It's an awkward place when someone ascends, um, and it's not you. But the people closest to me are still the closest people to me now. And I will tell you, my mother and father said, whatever it takes, if you have to move back home because you run out of money, you will continue to do this. So the people in your life are important.
Well, and I think one of the big things in that story, and one of the things that I've realized, is all the naysayers are the people that can't do it. They're just naysaying because they can't do it, not because they think you can't do it. So, whenever I hear someone naysay, I just, in my head, I just have this conversation like, I'm sure you think you can't do it, but I'm going to do it, and it becomes my jet fuel.
Well, I think it's that, and I would add that I think sometimes when we do things, it triggers fears in other people. So I don't know that all of them necessarily couldn't do it, uh, for any reason other than they were afraid to do it. So not because of any capability, but because uh, fear was their guiding principle. And so, uh, you and I talk about this all the time, especially now in this climate that we're in, that we still have choices that we can make. I do a lot of silly stuff. You've seen me do the Facebook um, dance off things in the morning. And uh, I do them for me as much as I do them for the people that are looking, because it reminds me that in every moment I can choose. I can choose exactly how I feel in every single moment, and that no one can take that from me. Uh, and once you embrace that, it almost becomes a thing where when you get haters, and Cat Williams, the comedian who said it in a much more colorful way, so I'm not going to say it the way he said it, but his point was, if you don't have haters, you're not doing anything.
Completely agree.
I mean, because if you're moving and grooving, it's upsetting apple carts somewhere. Um, but that it comes along with it. So if you have to be loved by everybody, you'll never be successful.
So Greg, a lot of people know you, that do know you, that are our friends or that are connections, as the speaker, Renaissance Unlimited, going around. But I don't know, new listeners and new guests to us don't know what the next step in your life was. And I'd like them to tell you, I'd like you to tell them
Okay.
about this decision that you made 7 or 8 months ago to go ahead and just, start a new business.
Yeah, like it was like I didn't have enough to do already. Um, so uh, Renaissance Unlimited is 25 years old. The wonderful thing about it was that it was pretty much self-sustaining. I had great relationships with a very wide and broad client base. So I really didn't have to do anything. Quite frankly, I told someone I had already rented my horse to ride off into the sunset with. Well, I leased it. I didn't want to buy the horse because I don't have any place to put a horse, but I leased a horse to ride off into the sunset with. Um, and then I realized that while everything was going well with Renaissance Unlimited, it had also kind of gotten easy. So part of what flips a switch, I think, for a lot of people that are trying to, like me, that are trying to find the next level, is to do something that really pushes you and challenges you. So 7 months ago, uh, you know, I, I was talking, well, actually, years ago, the conversation started where I was talking to some people that were telling me, you should think about doing X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, nah, I like what I'm doing right now. My office is around the corner from my kitchen. It's all good. Um, so then I decided to open an insurance agency in another state. So you want to talk about some questions I got the last few months? Like, okay, first of all, aren't you like aren't you like supposed to be retiring like soon? Like, why in the hell would you start something brand new? And why insurance? And why in Texas? I live in Georgia. Why in Texas? It's because I did some research and I have some very um, smart people that I keep by my side and mentors in the business. One of them that we'll get the chance to interview tomorrow. Um, that it made sense. And so it's actually the largest fiscal investment I've ever made in my life, ever, to do something I had never done before, in a place that was hundreds of miles away from my home. Um, but guess what happened just weeks ago? Renaissance Unlimited, getting on the plane, going to places where there's hundreds of people, getting back on the plane and flying back home. Guess what happened to that in the last 3 or 4 weeks? For all intents and purposes, it vanished. And had I not been thinking about what the next thing was going to be, I would be in a complete blank storm right now. I had, you and I talked about this. As soon as things started changing in the country and the shutdown started happening, I was at a conference that was ended in the middle of the conference in Columbus, Ohio. They walked into the conference and said, the governor just said no gatherings more than 100. Everybody has to go home. While a guy was speaking, wasn't me, thank God, but while a guy was speaking, over the next 5 days, I had 8 cancellations for speaking engagements. Now, for those of you who've never been to my website or don't know what I charge, you have no idea what it means to have 5 or have 8 speaking engagements canceled within a matter of 4 or 5 days. Some postponed, but till when? Nobody knows. So I'll just whisper it. That's like $50,000 that went away like steam.
So, Greg, I didn't talk to you about this today, but on the
Hmm.
news this morning, they were talking about this coronavirus and our new future, and I'd love that you just shared that story with, you know, that crazy idea of starting another business. And I always talk about the universe and how it
Hmm.
always looks out for us, but this morning it was talking about how everything is going to change for a while, like big events, like sporting events, movie theaters, and the third thing that they said is events
Hmm.
that people show up to in conferences, they hear speakers. And that was the third thing that they talked about. And you popped in my head because that was your business. And now, we have to figure out how even our ASA company that we have that coaches and teaches people around the country, we're going to have to reinvent ourselves to be more of a virtual platform. And I think this podcast and sharing this information with people and bringing people in that are now in the process of reinventing themselves because we have to think differently. We have to do business differently. So I didn't think about the insurance today when I thought about you because,
Hmm.
obviously I see you as an insurance agent, but I see you first as a speaker because that's what I've known for so many years. But I'm so glad that you shared that. And I think right now is the time that you need to think about what your reinvention looks like and how you're going to do business differently. And um, I want to share one more thing, and I don't want to take away from you, but
Yeah.
I was watching a live this weekend, and Drake happened to be on there,
Hmm.
and he was talking about how he's been trapped in his house and he's just recording music like crazy, and it just made me think about our business and the content and all this time that we have and how we should be pouring into it. And I hope that other people are thinking the same thing and thinking the same way that you did, and thinking about starting other businesses and being successful. So thanks for sharing that. And I know you're having massive success in that area, and I'm super proud of you. And it's been fun to get my popcorn out and watch you, on this the second big event and story that you're creating. So I have a question for you, and you don't know
Yeah.
any of these questions. So
Nope. Here we
what do
go.
you and what do you feel were your three biggest failures in your life? And they don't have to be current. They could be current. It could be 10 years ago. But what do you think your three biggest failures were in your life that you actually turned around and learned something from?
So, three biggest. Well, so I have to tell you, it's hard for me to answer that question because um, failure is how it felt in the moment. Um, so I could tell you three of the most painful things that I think they were a result of decisions, but
Well, and I know, I mean, you're a super positive guy, and
yeah,
the way I look at failures is just part of the process, right? I
right,
mean,
right,
you didn't totally fail unless you quit, but
right,
all of us have failures every single day.
right.
There was a failure that you had that you got kicked, and you were like, okay, I got to change something. I got to
Yeah.
tweak something. So, what were those? And I know this again for our listeners and for other people coming on here. I mean, this is really hard because, and I'm not saying you're egotistical in any stretch of the imagination, maybe just a little bit. That but it's really hard to admit these failures, right? But
Yeah.
I think if we can really look in the mirror and say, hey, I failed here and this is what came out the other side, what would that be?
So I would say probably the thing, my as failures and disappointments go, I think it would be um, my first marriage, um, because at the and the story is not unlike what a lot of people are familiar with. It's I was 23 years old when I got married, and I kind of figured that I knew who I was, and she probably thought she knew who she was, and we probably thought we knew who we were. Takes a long time to figure out you don't really know Jack at 23, except that you're going to be 24 at some point in time. But the the fact that that there were things that I did not understand and did not try to understand about how to um, create the right type of relationship. Or honestly, I would take it even back a few steps to say whether it was even fair to even initiate that relationship because of I just was so unprepared. I had not had very many relationships, so I didn't really know how to be a man in a relationship like that. The the biggest pain though was that at the point of where the divorce happened, Danielle was 4 turning 5 years old. And so when you say failure, it points to a specific moment for me, like a moment in time. And that moment in time was sitting on the floor across from a 4 year old, trying to figure out how to explain to them that you're not going to be there when they wake up in the morning. That was a big one. And so it actually is the odd thing about it is, um, because that's tough. So, and I know there are people that are listening to this that have been in a similar situation. So the not being able to sleep for more than an hour and having nightmares and all the things that come along with that because, she wasn't her fault, but now she has to pay this price. Um, that's that's one of the biggest ones. But what I learned from it though was oddly enough, I think I wanted so much not to be that divorced dad that was not engaged and not plugged in that um, I think I was a better father after than I was before, if that makes any sense. Um, I talked about how much I traveled. One of the reasons I traveled, and I could have actually made a lot more money at Renaissance Unlimited, that part of the business, throughout the time that my kids were in school. But the fact is that um, I never worked on their birthdays, my kids' birthdays. Now we have a blended family, so I don't work on their birthdays. I never worked on my wife's birthday. I never worked on our anniversary. Um, there were times where I turned down jobs because I knew that that job would mean that I wouldn't be able to go see my daughters play softball at a tournament, or I wouldn't be able to go see Danielle play basketball at a tournament because I could do that anytime I wanted to. I will tell you, um, but what it does is it teaches you that, from that kind of pain, you can rise. So I always thought I was going to author a book, and I thought it was going to be on business or customer service or travel travails. I had all these names, of books, and I still have in my mind. But the book that I ended up writing, I finished it just as Danielle finished college, and it was called Dad from a Distance. It is called Dad from a Distance. And so, of all the seminars I've ever given, um, the church my local church here in Atlanta, Impact, one of the folks there, Angie Johnson, who may hear this at some point in time, um, she knew a little bit about the story, and I told her about the book, and she said, "Would you do a workshop for men in the church?" I was like, okay. And so after I leaned into it, the question was, well, are they going to come? So no guys were registering. It's like, we got this space filler, we got this food. I said, they'll be there. But no one's registering. They'll be there. And so the morning of that, Jay, um, at the Atlanta Food Bank, there were like 30 men that showed up. And they were all dads from a distance. And so I did a workshop that I had never done before in my life about how non-custodial fathers can and still should be great dads. And of all the seminars I have ever done in my entire life, that was the greatest one for me. Guess how much money I made?
None.
None. In fact, I gave away copies of the books to every one of the guys there. But to this day, they are like my brothers. So success is the greatest success for me is that it allows me to have success that's not in the spotlight that nobody will ever know about. You know, my fraternity brothers know that um, community service is important and all those other type of things. So I do some philanthropy every year that helps kids go to college. Yeah, it's not on my website. I don't talk about that in my interviews when I'm talking to new employees about who I am because that's not part of that. Some some of my most significant successes, including having Danielle, by the way, write the foreword to the book, which is, by the way, the best part of the entire book. Um, Most of these are successes that will never see the light of day. My greatest successes are only known by a few people. The ones that say, you know, there's, oh, you got a office here in this really nice building in downtown Fort Worth, or you got a chance to speak in front of, you know, from the pulpit of the Ebenezer Baptist Church once on, you know, the anniversary of the slaying of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, the actual pulpit where he preached, I actually got a chance to speak from that place. There were a lot of people there, TV cameras there, but um, the mom that I got a chance to sit next to of one of the kids we mentor that cried to me because she thought her son potentially was going to go to prison, except for the things that my fraternity and brothers and I, and as a group, poured into him. No one knows that story, but that's the story. That's all the rest of this stuff allows me to do this. And one of the things that we have talked about, and you know, I've run my mouth way too long now because I want to get to the next interview. I want to interview you. One of the things that we talked about and have talked about for months when it comes to building this is making the point uh, and trying to figure out how to relay and how through all these different people's stories we can find the significance in the success. Because I can have success and be in a bubble. I can quantify that. I can look at bank accounts and all that other kind of stuff. But significance is something different. You know, what about what you did has impacted someone that you may never even meet? That's significance. And to me, I know you asked me for three things. I can't. The all three of them were wrapped up into that moment that I told you about. But it told me the importance of making sure that I was present, not only in my child's life, but in the lives of kids that don't have a presence. Um, so it's the quiet moments that are the biggest deal for me. I cherish them to this day. So they don't know that you're muted, Jay. So I'm going to
Oh,
go ahead and tell them
oh,
that you're
thank you,
muted.
thank you, thank you. Just trying
You're
to make sure
welcome.
we, yeah, this
He's
is
he's new to this.
I'm new to this game here. Just want to make sure you can't hear any sudden noises. So, um, and one of the big things that I've focused my life on from a very, very young age is coaches and mentors, and I know that's a big thing for you too because we talk about those. But I want to know who your favorite mentor ever in your life. I mean, from the skinny 72-pound kid to the now, 220-pound, 6 foot
Well, I don't
one
know
guy.
why. It's not really 220. I think you just
Oh,
went a little
okay.
beyond
Sorry.
there.
Oh, okay. What a 205.
I have
Um,
picked up a COVID-15. I will tell you that, like others have. So
so who has been your favorite mentor that you can like pick out and say, you know what, this is someone that I've gotten lots from, and I'm thankful that they were in my life.
easiest. It's a tie. That's the easiest question. My parents,
Okay.
hands down. Not even everybody else. And there are a lot of very significant people. You are among them, but everybody else is about 10 miles down the road from those two. Uh, because um, they, every moment was about you being what you're capable of being. Every single moment. I actually thought I was going to go to college in Atlanta for about 15 minutes. But my mom said, you know what she got? You know what I got for my high school graduation? My high school graduation present from my parents was luggage. because they said
Get
you have
out.
to you have to go. Yeah. Well, that was part of it. But they said you have to go further than where you are right now. So luggage was my high school graduation gift.
I think it's a great gift.
But it made a point to me. And that's what every moment, every word they spoke to me was about that. Was always about, spreading your wings and going further and challenging yourself and understanding that, even when I didn't tell them about the not having shorts on at Daryl's gym, they knew it. Um, and been pouring into me and having me always understand what my value was, even when I didn't get it and when I didn't believe it when they said it, quite frankly, sometimes.
So do you think that's my next question was going to be, what is the best thing that you think your parents taught you? What's the number one thing that they think taught you is just believe in yourself?
I think from my mother's point of view, it was and is um, to be a good person. In fact, that her dad, my grandfather, who was a father to 16 kids, my grandmother and my mom is the youngest of 16 kids. It kind of echoed from him because his thing used to be a good servant.
So one of the things I know about you, Greg, from being so fortunate to spend so much time with you, is just how people react to you and how you are, um, just this authentic soul and happy soul around them. But I'm interested when I hear you say your parents taught you to be a good person. What exactly does that mean to be a good person? And in what context, in what light? What is a good person?
Um, to understand that you're not better than anyone else, no matter what you accomplish. Um, that if someone needs your help, it's your obligation to help them. Um, I mean, I can remember as a kid, you know, people coming to dinner at our house, and my mom tells the same story when she was a kid because it's generational. That if you know that there's someone hungry, you feed them. Um, my dad, on the other hand, his lesson was you should expect to win.
Hmm.
You do not enter a game expecting to lose or not to lose too badly. In fact, that's become one of our training modules that we do at ASA is expect to win. And it always came from him. One of my favorite pictures is him with his arms stretched wide with a t-shirt on that says expect to win. That's where that class actually was born. But his thing is if you're going to get in the game, you run. And if you don't win, it better be because they were better than you. It better not be because you didn't give it everything you had. And so every time in my life where I felt like I was struggling, it's probably because I was going 70 miles an hour and I was capable of going 90, and my dad's voice was in my head. So be a good person and expect to win. And not just win for you, but win for other people.
So you and I have talked about this many, many, many times on what is the definition of success. And
Hmm.
I think the definition of success is so different for so many different people. It includes
Yeah,
so
oh,
many
yeah.
different things and so many different levels. Um, and I think, one of the things that we can't do is judge people on what their level of success means to them, because we're
Absolutely.
all at certain points in our life where, it could be that our family is the most important thing right now because of sickness, or because we want to spend time with them, or because it's a newborn, or because we have a 2-year-old that we don't want to miss out on things. So I think it can change hourly, daily. But what is Greg Gray's definition of success right now, today, in this moment?
Um, I think what success would look most like for me is to have my daughters see what I do, and my granddaughters and my grandson now see what I have do and have done, and that they know that they can that they don't have to be afraid. That's my biggest success, is that my kids can understand that they can go and they can run and they don't have to be afraid. And part of why I work so hard too is because they're going to trip and fall. There's just no way it's not going to happen. But I also want them to know that if they trip and fall, they're not going to fall that far because I have them. Because I don't want their fear of being who they are and what they can be to limit them.
And how do you have them?
How do I have them?
Yeah, like you make them feel that way. So your definition of success is to make them feel that way. Your family feels that way. And in what light?
Well,
Financially, emotionally.
Um, I think mostly emotionally. I think I my kids probably have. I'd be shocked if they ever had any idea how much money I made. Those are not conversations that we ever have around our household. Never have. So they would not be measuring it. I mean, they can go to my website like other people can go to my website and they can do math over time. But how much money I make has not ever really been the issue. The issue is in terms of them measuring it. I think it is that I hope it is. Let me say that. I don't know this. Maybe you'll have to interview them one day. Um, but my hope is that when they see what I do, the coolest thing is I'll go on a 3-day trip and months ago now, and talk to 3,000 people over the course of 3 days in 4 cities, and you know and have my picture on placards outside of rooms, and my face and people introducing me and all that kind of stuff. And the most important thing to them was that I was actually going to be able to get to their basketball game, because of that I could be where I wanted to be and see. And I have to tell you this. It's really funny because most people have no idea what I do. In fact, most of Danielle's friends, families had no idea what I did. So we were going all these um, tournaments and everything when they were younger. One of the parents just pulled me aside and said, "Okay, so we have to know, what do you do?" Because I think in their minds they had gone everywhere from drug dealer to arms dealer to black market salesperson, because they I never talked about what I did. Um, but their point was, I wish I could do that because you are always here. Even when we can't be here, you're always here. And that's just really cool. So again, that doesn't I can't, there's no online statement that measures that.
Yeah, I agree. Um, what is one habit that you could share with our listeners that if they committed to it wholeheartedly, went all in, you feel could change their life? One habit that you have in your life that you think if you could just get everyone to do this one thing, it would help change their life.
I intentionally find a reason to laugh every day.
So go
I
further.
know that's,
How?
uh,
How? Give me
uh,
some tools that you do,
I will,
because sometimes that's hard for people. So
yeah.
what do you? I mean, I know we've talked about, you listen to the comedy channel, you watch comedy,
Hmm.
you
Yep.
look online for comedy.
Yep.
So what could they do every single day that's gonna I love that idea.
Well, I think that what precedes being able to do it is not taking yourself too seriously. Um, but sometimes the funniest thing, Jay, I can find is what I look at in the mirror every day. It's when I look in the mirror and I go, how in the hell did you end up here after all of that other stuff and still kind of be standing here? I laugh uh, um, at because I'm bald, and I'm thankful to Michael Jordan because he was the first person to make going bald cool. So I was just, he's a great basketball player, also, I hear. But I think it's just the little things. Um, I can't define, like, there's not a place you go that for me that would be the same for you for laughter. Um, but I will tell you, a great place to do it is around kids because kids are funny,
Yep.
and the younger, the better.
It's so true.
Um, and they also teach you, remind you what it's like to be unfiltered and be pure in your thought and to communicate exactly what's on your mind. You know, kids and really old people, I'm envious of because they say whatever the hell they want to say. And the rest of us are like, guess I got to take it. That to me cracks me up. So,
Yeah, they are the definition of right here, right now. Because my daughter can be in a moment, and all of a sudden, I just have, I have some distraction mechanism that takes her, you know, focus off of what she really wants, and then she's on to the next thing. I mean, even this morning, I was, every morning we have a ritual of we watch either Frozen, Nemo, or Minnie, or all three. Why,
mm,
her mom or grandmother was making breakfast for her, and I just looked at her and I was just like, man, to be a 2-year old to only be focused on Frozen, and I'm sitting there and I have about 100 thoughts going on, like as I'm watching Frozen with her. Kids
yeah.
have that. So it's just like, how do you get there? So, and then when they laugh and smile, I mean, it makes you happy. So one last question for you, Greg, before we recap this up. What does Greg Gray want his legacy to be?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I did not get that question in advance. Um, I think what I'd like my legacy to be is not really about me. I think my the legacy that I think about most often is that, when I have turned to dust, that people will be able to see my children and see me.
Hmm.
And when people see my grandchildren, they'll be able to see me. That's my that's what I focus on a lot. I think all of us have at some point in time maybe these weird, quirky little things. Stephen Covey even talks about what people, what would you want if you lived your life exactly the way you wanted to live it? What would your eulogy be? What would all these key people in your life say about you? And of course, I think about that. I want to be I want to be seen as someone that cared and someone that meant what they said and someone that um, wasn't without fear but acted in the face of fear, um, even when it was unpopular. Um, but I think that the biggest legacy, the greatest legacy that I want, and I think any of us have, is what people do or think or believe or see or how they laugh or cry, um, because of the example that we set.
Hmm.
It's that's the coolest thing that can ever happen, is, and this happened a couple of times, is having one of my daughter's friends when they were in elementary school in third and fourth grade, walk up to me in mall and say, "Mr. Gray," wave and everything, because they remembered that while I didn't have the firefighter suit um, at career day, which by the way is a tough job to be next to the firefighter at career day, they remembered me sitting down laughing and talking to them. And they're 31 and 32 now, and they were 9 then. They just said, "You were just really funny. You were fun to be around." That's legacy. There's no money associated with that. There's no titles. There's no huge grave markers associated with that. Um, it's how people, there's a African proverb that says you will never die as long as someone remembers you. So I think that I just would always like to be remembered for something that was meaningful, but mainly be remembered for being a great dad, and being remembered for being a great grandfather, and being remembered for being a great husband or a brother or a son. And those are all things that I struggle with every day to try to ramp up, because all the rest of it is temporary. That's the other thing you learn about success. It's temporary. It doesn't stick. It doesn't there. You don't get there. The moment you think you do, um, COVID-19 happens.
Yeah. Well, the reason that we are doing the
This is
success,
extremely uncomfortable, by the way. I
I
want to
I
just
know,
say that
I
out loud,
I
that this is
well,
not a comfortable place for me.
well, the reason we're doing this is the biggest reason I wanted to do this. I'm not even sure if we're going to do any more podcasts. I just wanted to really get you uncomfortable. Um, no,
Check.
but seriously, the reason we're doing this is really not about us, but I think it was important to start off so that you know who you're talking to and what our story is and what we're trying to dig out of other people. Because
Yeah.
at the end of these podcasts, we're going to try to recap it in our language and one, talk about the takeaways and how we're going to apply them in our life and learn from these people and kind of, round up all that information for everyone on these podcasts. They probably won't be this long. Greg likes to talk a lot. So,
I do.
no, I'm
I
kidding, Greg.
do. It's a fact.
One of the things we talked about before doing this is I said, listen, he said, how long are we going to do this? How long are we going to go? And I said, we're going to go as long as it takes because I want it to be authentic. I want everyone listening to actually know the Greg that I know the stories behind Greg. And I think we did that today. So what I want to do before we finish up, and again, the success paradigm is different for every single person. And that's what we want to bring to you.
So I got to ask your permission, Jay. Can I ask your permission for something?
Yeah, I mean, usually you say that all the
I
time, but you
don't.
go
And
ahead and
then I
do it.
just
Yeah, yeah,
start
yeah, yeah,
talking.
yeah. Of
Yeah.
course, yeah, yeah.
So I have to do one last shout out for my mom. So one of the things that people like to say is that this guy is always smiling. He's like beaming from ear to ear. All the pictures are all teeth. Um, uh, when I was very young, I had lots of medical issues, seizures, convulsions, and all this kind of stuff. And so there was a medicine that they used to give children back then, um, to help with that. And it was called phenobarbital. And it's one of the few medicines I know the names of. And one of the side effects of phenobarbital is that if the child's teeth have not come in, it actually stains the teeth permanently in the child's gums. So I had this whole row of teeth that came out, specifically this one right here, that had this big brown dot on it. And my entire life, I had to tell people I didn't just have chocolate stuck on my teeth. Um, and it was most of my pictures, I didn't smile in high school and everything because I didn't want people to see that. Uh, and I know my mom always felt bad about it because she did it to save my life, but it was something that was a burden. And so when I got older, one of the first investments I made was I went to the dentist and I said, I want to have the smile that my mom wants me to have. So all of this got ground down. So these are crowns on it. You don't even know this. And so
I
the
don't.
smile that people see, it's for my mom.
And I know a lot of people aren't going to be watching this on YouTube or Facebook, where it will be every single time. For the ones that are not watching, whenever Greg was talking about the definition of success in his family, and now that he's talking about his mom, um, you know, I can tell that that's your success because I don't ever see you get emotional. I mean, I get more emotional than most
Yeah.
people. But I love to see you in that place of where you love your family and your mom and
Yeah.
your kids. That to me, that emotion is what I
Yeah.
recently learned to be success. When you
Right.
have that feeling in your heart and your soul.
Mhm.
Because I feel you, brother. And and you know I wasn't planning on this, but you are family to me. I love you like you're my brother, and you've
Yep.
taught me so much.
Mhm.
And I'm glad to run with you, man. I'm glad to learn from you. I'm glad that I get to talk to you every single day, every single morning, every single night, every single afternoon.
Yep.
And for the people that know Greg, um, he's changed a lot of lives, and I'm just glad to be able to have the access that I do to you as a friend and as a family member. So I'm going to recap this real quick, Greg.
Good. Yeah. Get us off of that.
So, I'm going to give you my 4 biggest takeaways. And that's why I want to dig in and be a good person, because I think you gave us a definition of what being a good person is. And I think right now it's just helping everyone that you possibly can. And right now we know a lot of people need help. I'm seeing a lot of food banks lined up with people that don't have food, single moms. So anybody listening to this, there's always a way to help people. And I think that's one of the things that Greg is always looking for, that opportunity. Expect to win at everything. um, and I know that you're going to lose some things, but you only lose if you give up and expect to win going at every single deal or every single thing you do, and you'll lose less.
Hmm.
um, Laugh every day, which I think that's probably the unspoken why we talk every single morning, because there's always some kind of comedy or fun coming out of our conversations.
Every day. Yep.
Yeah. And then I think the most important part of success for you, and I think for me, and what I heard in the definition of your success, is how you impact your family, and your success is leaving them with the understanding that they can do or be anything that they want to be. It's
Yep.
completely up to them. And if you can convince them of that, and you can see that success in them because they've taken those chances, they've taken those risks, then that's why you were here.
Yep.
So that is the success paradigm. And I know one of the things that you were saying about this podcast, and I haven't told you this today either, because this was a thought that I had, but um, your big thing that I hear you say all the time is success is about significance. And that comes loud and clear through how you care about your family and the people's lives that you impact. But the other thing that I want to leave everyone with, because that's your thing, and
Hmm.
I think success has no limit. You can have whatever you want. There is no limit on anything except for the limit you put on yourself. No one can put limits on you. And I think that's what we want to teach each and every week. And I think what you're going to hear from our guests, the people that have had the most success have had no limits. And the most important thing to them is significance. So with that, Greg, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to interview you. I look forward to working with you and interviewing folks together. That's going to be a lot of fun when we're not talking
Oh,
about
yeah.
us. Um,
Absolutely.
so to the next podcast, we glad you guys tuned in, and we look forward to going on this journey with all of you. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a very, very blessed day.
All right. Love you, Jay.
Love you more, buddy.